Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Executive Function Practical Approaches for Parents. My name is Lindsay Garcia, and I'm the Executive Director of the 22Q Family Foundation, and I also am a parent of a 9-year-old with 22Q. We're going to give everyone a few minutes just to kind of log in. I just want to start off by saying that this webinar received by far the most interest over any other webinar we have ever offered. I think it's partly just due to the fact that raising a child with 22Q oftentimes is not the only diagnosis that they will have. ADHD is one of the most common comorbidities of 22Q. I know, time management, organization, problem solving, emotional control. These are all things that I see in my own house that I see my child struggle with. And I'm sure many of you are shaking your heads in agreement with me that you see the same things. And that's why you're here tonight, to learn more as far as a parent and how you can help support them. And that's why we're really all here tonight. So our presenter will be sharing practical approaches for parents with how to assist with these deficits. So we're going to go ahead and get started with introductions. So for over 25 years, Eileen Nordmeyer, our speaker for tonight, has enjoyed working with children, families, and adults as a speech-language pathologist. Over the course of her career, she's worked in a variety of settings and gained experience with individuals of all ages with executive function deficits. Currently, Eileen also provides services as an executive function coach with the Chicago Family Tutor. She has the unique experience of understanding what it's like to provide services to others as a professional, while also implementing strategies in her own home. As a parent of a child with 22q 11.2 deletion syndrome, she knows how important it is for families to find workable solutions that fit their lifestyle, and uses her expertise and collaborative approach to promote success and create desired change. Knowing the challenges that individuals may face has given Eileen valuable insight and allowed her to work as a strong advocate for children and families. She has created, led, and participated in numerous private and school-affiliated educational and support programs. Eileen also happens to be one of the first moms that I met, having a child with 22Q. We met at the zoo a long time ago in Chicago, and we have become friends over the years. So I'm thrilled to have her reach out and share her expertise on this topic. So without further ado, Eileen, you can go ahead and take the stage. And while she is speaking, please feel free to put your questions or comments in the chat or the Q&A box. And at the very end, we will definitely save time to get your questions answered. Thank you so much, Eileen.
Great. Hi, Lindsay. Thank you so much for inviting me today to speak and to share some of my expertise as an executive function coach, speech pathologist, and most importantly, a parent. As you mentioned, I have two teens with executive function challenges, as well as ADHD, and my son does have 22Q. So a couple of things, housekeeping right off the bat. You probably can hear from my voice. I'm getting over a head cold, so thank you for your patience and your understanding. I'm hoping that it sticks, doesn't give me too much problem as we talk in the next hour. Also, I want you to know that for ease of presentation today, I'm going to be referring to you all as parents working with children and teens that have executive function challenges. But you will soon see that the strategies we talk about today can not only be applied to adults, but they can also be applied to other settings as well. And lastly, I'm going to refer you back to the 22Q Family Foundation's YouTube page for an excellent presentation given by the folks at UC Davis, California, on executive functioning. They talked really a lot about the basics, understanding of the brain, the normal development of skills, as well as school-based services. And when talking with Lindsay, we really thought it made the most sense not to replicate this excellent presentation, but to really focus on some more functional strategies that parents can use. So that's what the focus is going to be today. But having said that, we do need to spend just a little bit of time talking about what executive functioning is. Make sure that everything makes sense when we continue the presentation. So those are the brain-based skills that we use for humans to effectively execute and perform tasks and solve problems. It's a set of multiple cognitive capacities that act in a coordinated way based in the frontal lobe of the brain that really help us get stuff done. It involves cognition and behavior, so thinking and doing. And executive functioning affects everything that we do as humans, learning to read, learning to socialize, how to cook, to plan a trip, to pay your bills. You name it, executive function is involved in these tasks of everyday living. So development of these skills involve both biology as well as experience. And it's important to note that executive function challenges are not a standalone diagnosis. You're not going to find them in things like the DSM-5. What you will find is that they'll be referred to as a weakness that's associated with diagnoses like ADHD, autism spectrum disorders, stroke or brain injury, 22q, sleep disorders, mood disorders. These skills are developmental and they don't fully mature until anyone is in their 20s. There are some norms based with it. I am going to give you a reference in just a minute, but we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. But it is important to know that if you have a kid with ADHD or some of these challenges, they're going to be presenting with about a 30% delay behind their peers with executive function skills. So it's important to know because you need to know what you should be expecting of your child or teen, and you should be knowing what you can target then that's appropriate for their level. Executive functioning is not at all associated with intelligence. Think the absent-minded professor. They're not correlated at all. And they most certainly are not character flaws or consciously chosen states. And unfortunately, a lot of these kids with these deficits are labeled as lazy or unmotivated or apathetic or irresponsible or stubborn. And that's really just not the case. It's really these skills that are lacking. I'm going to give you just a minute to either take a picture of this screen or make a note of the reference. It's lifeskillsadvocate.com. What I like about this handout is that it breaks down into age level and it also breaks down into the domains. So it gives you some good idea of what those developmental expectations should be. You really could honestly just Google executive function norms and you'll be able to find that as well. But I liked this one and how it was put together. So now looking at the definition for executive functioning, you're not going to find agreement in that. And you're also not going to find agreement in the different domains or categories of executive functioning. Some professionals feel like there's 30, some feels like there's 13, there's 3, there's 5. And really, I think we're all talking about the same thing. It's just people are choosing to categorize it in different ways. I like to use the Smart But Scattered series, which is Peg Dawson and Richard Guar. I hope I'm saying his name correctly, but they break it down into 11 different domains. And these are the ones that I like to use when I'm working with teens and families. So the first is time management. That is how we estimate time, how we use time wisely, staying within time limits. The next is planning and prioritizing, which is figuring out how to get things done, what is important, and when to do it. The next is organization, which is keeping track of things or information. Metacognition is thinking about thinking. It's that ability to self-monitor and self-evaluate. And I always like to work on advocacy in this area. Task initiation is getting started. Response inhibition is that impulsivity. It's thinking before you act or talk and evaluating a situation. Working memory is the ability to hold information in your memory while doing other things. It's allowing us to work with information without losing track of the thing that we're currently doing. Emotional control and self-regulation is managing your emotions. Flexibility is adaptability and the ability to revise in the moment. Sustained attention is keeping focus on a task. And goal-directed persistence is that stick-to-itiveness, the ability to set and complete goals and not be distracted. So you can easily see how, when you're struggling with executive functions and knowing how much they are involved in your everyday life, that you can present as someone who's always making mistakes. You're easily distracted. You're not following directions, not finishing work, not avoiding tests that are too hard, making the same mistakes. It really can be impactful. And for that reason, it really needs to be addressed. But I often get asked, why work on executive functioning when we know the kids are going to develop? It's going to develop as they get into their 20s. And, quite honestly, obviously, it's because our kids are a little bit of a delay in this area. But more importantly, we're hoping to form new habits that will be present as your child ages and matures. We want to set the ground, the basis on which they can build upon. We want to take advantage of that amazing brain and its ability to make change, which is neuroplasticity. We want to reduce frustration in both your child as well as in yourself. And we really want to make sure we're improving awareness of what these challenges may be and help these kids learn how to ask for what they need to have success. And part of that involves changing their mindset. So many kids fall into this vicious cycle of, I'm bad at that, or I can't do that, or I'm always late. And it really is debilitating and can really create a lot of shame and guilt and bad feelings. And an example of this is, we've been working a lot with my son on cooking. And he fights us every time. And I'm not good at it, and I hate it, and I don't want to do it. And then we're frustrated, and he's frustrated, and it's just a bad experience. But luckily, we've been working on this awareness and executive functioning. And he was able to say to me recently, the reason why I don't like cooking is because of the time pressure. And I don't like that everything's happening all at once. And I was like, all right, we got this. Now we know what we can do, right? It's not that you're bad at cooking, it's that we haven't set it up for you in a way that it makes it easier. So we can go step by step and get all the ingredients ready and follow a photo model and not do two things at once. So we can get there. It's not that you're bad at it, it's just that we haven't figured it out yet. So what do we do to help, right? We provide support. We use accommodations and modifications. We use technology. We use strategies. And like it or not, parents, we are going to act as their frontal lobe for at least some degree of time. But obviously, we don't want to do that forever, right? We need to help them learn internal control and to work towards independent use, right? We want to teach skills directly. You can't assume that they're not just being used. So if you tell your team to go clean their room and they don't do it, it's not that, it's that they're stubborn or they don't want to, or, it might be they don't know where to start. They don't know how to break it down. They don't know exactly what to do. They need you to teach those skills directly. We want to encourage practice. Consistency is key in building new habits, right? It takes 4 to 6 weeks for habits to build. So many people give up before then. You really need to be looking for those tiny little micro successes, and you need to build momentum and tweak the process as you go along. So we want to encourage continuing to practice and develop those skills. We need to get these kids and teens to accept these challenges. Just like someone who has poor vision, uses glasses, your brain isn't really great at organizing. So you might need to do a brain dump and have a to-do list, right? I often say it's not good, it's not bad, it just is. And what are we going to do about that? And we want to encourage that growth mindset. Permanent change takes time. We want to add that yet to the end of the statement. So it's not, I'm not good at cooking, it's I'm not good at cooking yet. And the way that we're going to get better at that is to figure out what works for you. And what works may not be the same as what you as a parent uses. It might not be the same as what your other children use. It may not be what they are recommending for them in therapy or at school. You have to find out what works for your child. So, for example, a common problem is morning routines, getting out the door on time. And, I just Googled and found this beautiful little checklist with everything laid out that needed to be done. It looks great. But what if you have an Aubrey? Like poor Aubrey, she's just not having it. She wants nothing to do with this checklist. And when that happens, then you need to start thinking creatively and what you can do to get the same result that you're looking for. Now, in my house, we started with those checklists and had many different iterations and many different working models. And we came up with these two. On the left is my son's. He has all of his hygiene items in that bin. It's under our sink. He takes the bin out. Everything comes out of the bin. When he's done, everything goes back in and it gets put away. My daughter uses something similar. She has a shelf model though. So everything's on one shelf. After it gets used, it's moved down to the bottom shelf. So is this a perfect system? No. Is it better? Yes, because we're using it and we're working on it. And it's things that we found out were helping and working for them. So as part of that process, we need to think about how do our kids think? How do they learn best? What motivates them? And we really need to empower them to figure out what got in the way. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. And we have to also problem solve possible solutions. This is very much in line with Ross Greene, his Plan B, his collaborative problem solving, thinking about in a time that is not when you guys are frantic and rushing out the door, but later on, when everything's calm, sitting down and saying, what got in the way of us getting out of the door today? How can we work on that? What can we do to make it better? So you're really involving your child. And I got to tell you though, parents, that this may mean you need to let your child fail. And trust me, professional Eileen fully supports this. I know that this is the right strategy. Mom Eileen has a really hard time with this. And I think a lot of it has to do with, and I'm going to bet that many of you are this way. We are problem solvers. We are doers. We are thinkers. We're ready to swoop in and make everything right. And my husband's much better at this than I am, but I'm working on it. And I really am trying to find the moments when I can let this learning happen so my kids can take ownership and come up with solutions. My son has been traveling quite a bit this summer. His first trip away with my husband, he wanted no part of making a packing list, didn't want my help, my involvement, nothing. So as a result, he forgot a ton of his hygiene items, and even worse, he forgot his shorts. So he had to sit out in the ballpark in the 90-degree heat in his long pants, but that was on him. So the next time he traveled, he got on board with me. I said, hey, let's make a Google Keep. Let's make a packing list. You can have it always and forever. He was fine with doing that. When the time came, he wanted no part of it. He instead made his own packing list, had my husband look it over. They had better success, still not perfect. So the last time he traveled, he was actually at the Dragonfly Forest 22Q camp. And he came to me before camp started and said, hey, Mom, I think we need to make a pack list before I go away to camp. And I was like, yes, all right, great idea. Let's do that. But we only got there because he had to go through all these other steps and realize it was important and come up with that idea on his own. So as much as you can, parents, I really encourage you to let your kids take the lead and try to figure it out. Because when we do figure it out, we're going to take a look at what got in the way. And we use this statement with curiosity and investigation. It's not out of shame. It's not out of guilt. It's not out of punishment. It's in those calm moments where you're sitting down with your child to figure out what is getting in the way of them accomplishing what they need to do. Because when you look at problems such as you're always running late for school in the morning, if you assume you know what's wrong, you may be targeting the wrong thing. So let's say maybe your kid is taking too long in the shower. Well, that could be a time management issue, and maybe they need a music playlist. If they can't find their shoes, well, that might be organization, and they might need a launch pad or to find where everything has a place. Maybe they're worried about a test. That could be emotional regulation, and they need some coping strategies. Maybe they're running from room to room and they can't find what they need and they have no plan. They need to prioritize. They need to maybe come up with a morning routine with a forward flow. Maybe they were distracted by electronics. That's impulsivity. And maybe you need to have some hard rules about where these distractors are, when they can be utilized, or use some technology to prevent them from doing that. Maybe they sat in bed after their alarm went off. Well, that's initiation. So maybe you need to find a different alarm or move the placement of the alarm, or maybe you need to start your routine 10 minutes earlier so they can have a slow start. Maybe their brother was in the shower when they were supposed to be. Well, that's flexibility. And maybe they need to learn how to come up with a plan B. Or maybe they, even though you reminded them during breakfast, they got to the car and realized that they had to go back in and get their project they forgot. Well, that's working memory. And maybe they need to do a brain dump and find a way to get the things that are important to them. So, honestly, for our kids, they're probably more than one of these things. But at least when you start to analyze, you're kind of going to figure out where you can start. Now, You may often hear, I don't know, from your child when you're asking, what can we do about this? And that's pretty common. In the vein of trying to get them involved, there's a couple things you can try to do to get those juices going, to come up with some solutions. And the first is to give them time to process it. They may need to catch up. So it might be, well, why don't you think about it? And later after dinner, we can spend 10, 15 minutes and talk about what you came up with. You might need to tie it to a previous success. That alarm is working really well to get you off games when you need to be done. Is there a way that we can use an alarm to help you with this? You might say, guess. Why don't you just guess with something that might work out and do some process of elimination? You might ask them to look at, what do other people do in this house to have success with that? What do your friends do? What do other kids in class do? You can ask some leading questions. You may have strategies in mind, and you may want to just help them get to the conclusion on their own, even though it's a suggestion of yours. And you might also want to give options if they really are stuck. Well, do you think we could do it this way or this way? Which one seems more appealing to you to start off with? So if you hit that road bump, keep trying to get them involved to come up with their own strategies. Okay, so it is impossible for me to know all of your kids what got in the ways. What I tried to do here was come up with some practical strategies, some skills, some tips and ideas to get you started. And come up with that, what do I do when you're feeling stuck? Now, just like all the different domains of executive functioning overlap, so do these strategies. So I really did my best just to put them in the areas that they applied most appropriately with, but know that there can be some overlap with these strategies as well. These strategies come from my years of my experience, taking classes, doing webinars, reading, finding things online. But I find that these three are my gurus, the people that I go back to time and time again. And the first is Seth Perler, and he's at sethperler.com. He has a lot of great video blogs, a lot of great references. He's actually doing a free summit right now this weekend, which I've been frantically trying to catch up with when I had time. My second is Leslie Josel. She's orderoutofchaos.com. That's orderoochaos.com. And she has a lot of good links as well, a lot of products that she recommends. She'll have a link right to them. A lot of great books and references. And the others are the originals, Peg Dawson and Richard Guar with that Smart But Scattered series. They dive a lot into the how and the why and the brain and writing goals and some of the basics, but I find they're a good reference as well. So please take some time and look them up as well. Okay, I'm gonna take a quick drink here before we dive in. Okay, organization. One of the big things is that you have to make sure that everything has a place. So I take off my rings, they go in my ring bowl in the kitchen or in my ring box upstairs. That's it, nowhere else. Shoes only go by the front door or in the closet, nowhere else. You need to really find the place for everything. And some of that involves creating what we call launch pads. So my kids, the night before they go to school, they both have a place where their backpacks live. Next to that backpack is their shoes, their water bottle, their project for the day, and their Chromebooks are inside the backpack, charging in the wall. You can also do this for sports or music or whatever the case may be. After your cleats are cleaned, they go back into the bag with your launch pad for soccer. So you set up systems for them to be able to find what they need. And the last strategy is to make it easy to see. Leslie Josel talks a lot about room organization. She's a big proponent of, being able to see everything. So toy bins, not toy boxes. She even advocates for not having dressers, having clear bins, not having a closet door, having it taken down so you can see everything that you need to get to. Is your kid wearing the same clothes over and over again, or taking dirty clothes out of the laundry just because they can't find what they have, they don't remember where it is? Make it visible. For school organization, Seth Perler actually has a lot about that, as well as study spaces. Everything's color-coded, everything is labeled. The jury's kind of out about these big old binders here, whether or not they find them helpful. I use them for both of my kids, and they're successful because everything has a place and it's in that binder, okay? One thing I will recommend, we're going to talk about backpack cleanouts and binder cleanouts is that you create something that's called an in limbo folder. So as you're cleaning out your papers, if you know you need to keep it, it goes in its spot. If you know you can recycle it, it goes in the bin. If you're unsure, put it in the limbo bin. Let it live there for a little bit until you see if you need it or not. Because you don't want to be the parent that's out digging through the recycle bin, trying to find that paper that shouldn't have been put in there. I know I have been in that position. Okay, let's talk about time management. More often than not, these kids have what we call time blindness. They cannot experience the passage of time. They don't know what it feels like. They don't know how to experience it. So more often than not, you need to make time visible. And that means having analog clocks in your house, putting it on your phone screen, having it readily available so they can see that hand moving and know the passage of time. Just saying, you can play games for an hour isn't enough because they can't experience what an hour is. They need to use something like in the middle there, you see the time timer, where the big chunk of red will get smaller as time passes. Excuse me. Or for my kids, that was too babyish. So we just got a travel alarm clock, and you can see I used just a dry erase marker and put it when they needed to stop. So they can see the hour hand moving, the minute hand moving, and they know that they're approaching the end of their time. You can also make time more experienced by using music. So you can make a playlist, a shower playlist, 3 songs, how long it needs to be. Then your kids know that by the middle of the second song, I need to be working on my hair. By the third song, I need to be getting out and drying off. You can use music for studying. You can use music for chores, but it really also helps them develop that innate sense of time. Excuse me. You also want to make sure that when you're using alarms and reminders, which is big in my house, that you either need to act on them or reset them when those alarms or reminders come up. So you may have a reminder that pops up on your phone, call the doctor at 2 o'clock, but you're in the middle of something else. You can't just let that go. You have to reset it if you're not going to do it at 2 o'clock. So set it for 15 minutes or reset it. Same thing with an alarm. If the alarm goes off, it needs to be reset once the time is done. And you also want to help, I want to go back for a second, to help learn how to estimate time. So you can say, how long do you think it takes us to walk the dog? Have them guess and then actually time it out. Or do you think that we can unload the dishwasher in under 5 minutes? And then you say, oh, it only took us 3. Like you're helping them learn time. Or even to backload time. We need to be downtown at 12. It's going to take us an hour to get there, 15 minutes to park, another 5 to walk. We need to leave at this time, right? You're going to help them figure out how much time is in the tasks that you're doing in everyday life. And part of that is setting routines. One of the first things I do is help these teens develop morning routines and evening routines. And we move backwards. What time do you need to be out the door? List all the things that you need to get done. Figure out how long each one of those things takes, build a little buffer, and then talk about a forward moving plan. So you're starting in your room, everything gets done there, you go to the bathroom, everything gets done there, down to the kitchen, out to the garage, right? You're not bouncing around back and forth, you're moving in one motion to get done. And you can set routines for evening or for cleaning or whatever the case may be. Planning and prioritizing. Universally, all executive function coach will say that people with executive function challenges need to plan. They just have to. And they always need to be planning, and they always need to be updating their plans. Now, planning can be short-term, it can be goal-related, it can be weekly, monthly, homework-based. There's all different ways to plan. The ones that I have on this page are referring to short-term goal plans. And those are using things like goal, plan, do, review, revise, or get ready, do, done. The references are there on the screen. And that helps you think about what your overending goal is. What does done look like? It helps you figure out the things that you need to achieve that plan. It has you figure out the steps that you need to do, and then also has you take a look at the end and see what things you might have changed or what you might want to do differently. So that's some short-term planning. Now, long-term planning, there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. There's all different kinds of planners, day planners, weekly planners, homework planners. I would advise, if you are using a planner of any sort, you need to make sure that it has a monthly view, just not a daily or weekly view. You need to be able to see the big picture. If you have a test that's the end of the month, you need to see it, and then you need to back plan and figure out what days am I going to study for that, or how many days is it going to take for me to do this project. You also need to think about have tos and want tos when you're planning. So the things that are immovable, the things that have to get done versus the things that you want to do. Now, those could be paper planners or they could be online. Guys, there are so many online products. I can't even keep up with them. And my stream is flooded every day with new ones that are coming down. There's new ones now that involve AI that can help you do the planning for you. But I know that Leslie Josell, who I respect, she recommends Evernote as one of the products that she likes. I honestly, I use my iPhone products and I use my Google products. I also use paper products as well. I do a little bit of a hybrid. So there's a ton of different products out there. There's a lot of question about whether or not your child should be using an online planner or a written planner. There is some research that talks about writing things down, getting stuck in the brain more. But to me, it just goes back to what's going to work for your child. If you get them this beautiful planner and they're never using it, what good is it? It's not doing you any good. So figure out what's going to work, stick to it, and make sure it becomes habit. In my house this summer, this is kind of what we did. It's a combination, actually, of the to-do list and a planner. We broke it down by week. And we typed in the things that could not move. You know, those are the things like summer school or therapy appointments or so forth. And then at the bottom, we had a running list of the have-tos and the want-tos. And then my kids filled in, their have-tos, their chores, the SAT prep, driving, getting driving practice. We filled those in where it thought it made sense. And then we also had the want-tos, which would be hanging out with friends or going to the movie or, scheduling an activity. And we figured out where those needed to go. And what's good about this is that it helps you decrease your cognitive load, right? It's not all in your head. Now it's down on paper. And it helps you develop flexibility and gain some control because you're able to look and see where you need to move things. I am able, when someone says to me, hey, can you do this at 2:00 instead of 4? I can think it through in my head and realize I can shift this or move this. Our kids can't do that. So they need to be able to see it. And they need to see like, oh yeah, at 5:00, I can do my laundry. I have time tomorrow at 6. I'm going to move that over and I can meet with you for dinner now. So this is just something we came up with on our own, and it really helped this summer. Working memory. Again, too much going on in these brains. They cannot keep it there. You got to dump it. You got to do a brain dump is what I'll say. And that's using to-do lists, reminders, calendars, planners, all of those things. Like we talked about, I said I use a hybrid. I have a reminders list on my phone. I also have a paper to-do list. I like using my little Post-it note there because those are the things that have to get done right away. I put that up on my cabinet if I need to. Then I have shorter term goals and longer term goals. But I also have this reminders list. And that reminders list are often things that come to me when I'm not at home. Some of those things are things that need to get moved then to like a gift idea list or maybe to my calendar. I'm going to be honest, though, there's some things that live in my reminders list that probably should be on my to-do list or vice versa. I don't question it, though, because it works for me, right? I'm not going to push it too hard. I wake up every morning, I look at my reminders, I look at my to-dos, and I look at my calendar, and that helps me get ready to do what I need to do for the day. It doesn't have to be pretty unless you want it to. The one in the middle there looks pretty. Some people need that motivation. It just has to work. Okay, so get a system and how you can do a brain dump. Saying things out loud is helpful, and using melody is also helpful because you're going to incorporate different parts of the brain. So I go in, my son's playing a game, and I say, hey, when you're done, I need you to take the garbage out. And I'll say, all right, what do you need to do? Look at me. And he'll say, all right, take the garbage out. And then we'll say, how will you be reminded? Number one thing to ask your kids, because that pushes them to action, not how will you remember, okay? How will you be reminded? And then he'll say, I'm going to set an alarm, or I'm going to put it on my to-do list, or I'm going to go take care of it right now. So that's a great question to ask. But if you also really want to guarantee an eye roll, make a little song. Take out the garbage when you're done, 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 right? They're for sure going to hate it, but it might stick in their head, right? So use melody. And then also get into the habit of check before you go. So you're leaving the house. Do I have my keys, phone, and purse? Do I have my backpack, water bottle, project? Say it out loud. Check before you go. Okay, excuse me, I'm taking another drink. All right, emotional regulation. I think it goes without saying that no other higher level cognitive strategy will work if you are not emotionally regulated. That fight, flight routine is going to win out 100% of the time. So from a young age, it's really important that you're working with your kids to know their awareness of their thoughts, that mindfulness, their feelings, their bodily sensations, that environment, through systems like the zones of regulation or the windows of tolerance, so they can gauge where they're at, and then they can begin to learn what they need to do to get out of that state so they can function at their best ability. That involves things like meditation, the practice of focusing or clearing the mind using mental and physical techniques. There are a million coping strategies. I could talk for days just on coping strategies. So please take a look into those and figure out what works for your kid, but also be willing to know when you need help, when it's bigger than you, when you need to look for a counselor or a therapist or a social worker that can help your kid regulate and to get into their best state. As always, sleep, nutrition, and exercise are key to having good emotional regulation. And I like to kind of foster this thank you versus I'm sorry mindset. It's very easy to just apologize. I'm sorry I'm late. I'm sorry I'm late. I'm sorry I'm always late, right? Instead, you want to flip that into a thank you. Thank you for your patience in waiting for me. And depending on the level of familiarity, if they're saying it to you as a parent, you can also then follow up with what's going to happen next. Thank you for your patience for waiting for me. Next time when my alarm goes off, I'm going to remember to reset it, right? So it, again, pushes them into action. Metacognition, that's that thinking about thinking. That's that what got in the way that we talked about earlier. And as a parent, it's really great to ask how questions. How are you able to find your homework? It must be difficult. In your head, you might be saying, because your backpack is a mess. Don't say that out loud. Keep that in your head. But ask, how can you help yourself with that? How can you act differently next time? Or how can I help you with that? And when you catch them using a strategy or doing something that you had planned, really to celebrate that. How did you do that? That was awesome. I'm so impressed, that you got everything done that I needed you to do before you went to bed, right? So ask that, have them celebrate that micro success. You need to teach reflection. So when they're ready to hand in homework, is this good enough for my teacher? Or if they're done cleaning their room, I'll say, hey, am I going to be satisfied with that? Would mom like it? Is this clean for mom? What does done look like? Help them reflect on that and be able to work towards that as a goal. 100% your kids need to be aware of what's in their IEP and in their 504s and know what their accommodations are. So many of my parents will say, yeah, he has a 504, but he doesn't really use it. He doesn't ask it. He doesn't, even know what's in it. And there's this weird switch in education where all of a sudden teachers expect your kids just to be in charge of that. They expect them just to know it all and to ask. They don't want to hear from you as parents anymore. So they I really want your kids to know what those are and what's going to help them have the success, which also involves them becoming comfortable talking with or emailing teachers. You can even help them by creating a template. The conference I was listening to this weekend, there's a group called efspecialist.com where they actually have a bunch of different templates they're happy to share with you. If you want to check it out, you can do that. And it is a great setup for helping your kids learn to communicate their needs with their teachers. Okay. Initiation. I've got 2 different 2-minute rules for you. So the first is, if it's going to take less than 2 minutes, do it now. And that comes from the Getting Things Done series. So don't put the dishes in the sink. It's going to take less than 2 minutes to get them in the dishwasher, right? Don't just throw your mail in the pile. It's going to take less than 2 minutes for you to read it and recycle it if you don't need it. Something I'm working on, right? We all can benefit from this. If it's going to take less than 2 minutes, do it. The second is, if you want to build a habit, do it 2 minutes a day. And this comes from the Atomic Habits series. And the thought behind that is that a habit needs to be established before it can be expanded. So I heard this talk with this med student who wanted to be the kind of guy who studied an hour a day before dinner. He knew that was going to be hard. So he started off just becoming the guy who studied 2 minutes every day before dinner. And then he became the person that studied every day before dinner. And then he was able to build upon that. So 2 minutes, do it every day. It's going to take less than 2 minutes. Do it now. You can use all sorts of countdown timers. If your kid has a hard time starting, think New Year's Eve, big and loud, makes a big, has a different picture that comes up, has a different kind of siren that goes off. That can help get started sometimes. You also can work in small steps. So breaking down tasks, not just go clean your room, it's go pick up your clothes off your floor. And then what's important to do then is also to write down what the next step is going to be. So write on your to-do list, you're going to have that first step. Once it's done, you're going to write down what the next step will be. That helps keep that momentum going. And you can also pair likes with dislikes. So folding laundry while you watch TV is a great one. My son loves it. That works for him. Or eating popcorn when you study. Okay, so pair some positives with things that might not be preferred. Flexibility. Flexibility kind of goes against a lot of what we've talked about today. I've talked a lot about routines and habits and doing things the same way all the time. But as we all know, that's not life. Life happens, right? Things get in the way. So you need to teach your kids to learn how to pivot. I know one family that would say it's a plot twist. You need to come up with a new ending. I use what's your plan B? So you also have to help these kids think in the gray. Sometimes they're very black and white thinkers. It's done this way only. I can't do it that way. So then you need to start to think, well, what's one little thing that you can do to change to get you more in the gray? Think about what worked before. What are some strategies that helped? Or look around. What is everybody else doing in this situation? And try new or different things. It might be that you still work out every day at 3, but now this time, instead of a bike ride, which you usually do, you're going to go to the Y. Or this is the route you usually take to drive to school. Well, guess what? We're going to pretend like there's road, construction. You have to drive another way today. So as much as you can, incorporate things that are novel into your days as well. Sustained attention. You want to set yourself up for success, and that takes some of that thinking about yourself, right? How do I need the room to be light or dark to have my best focus? Cold or hot? Do I need to work on this before or after I work out? Do I need to have dinner first? Do I need to break it up into smaller tasks? You need to think about what environment works best for you. I will often have students rate their level of attention for all the different classes throughout the day. And if it's not an 8 or above, I'd say, well, what's one thing you can do to improve your attention? Before that class, go get a drink of water. Make sure you're sitting at the front. In that class, make sure your phone is gone or you have something to hold in your hands, right? You think, how can you improve your attention? Self-talk is wonderful. My daughter's learning to drive. She's talking the whole time. I see the car up ahead of me and now I'm putting on my turn signal. It keeps her in the moment, right? Same thing for working on a math problem, talking it through. Or I'm on paragraph 2, now I'm going to go on to paragraph 3. Talk yourself through it. Oftentimes, I recommend using the Pomodoro method for studying or working. It's a 25-minute work with a 5-minute break. You cycle that 4 times, and then at the end, you get a bigger break. And a lot of time that helps because there's an end in sight. With that 25 minutes, it keeps you going because you're going to get a break. You also need to put yourself in do not disturb mode. That might be finding an area where no one's going to be interrupting, might be putting a sign on the door. It might be using technology to avoid you using your technology. There's all different apps out there to block you from things that can take away your focus. And then there's also something called body doubling. That's working in an environment where someone else is working. So that's why a lot of people like to go to the library to study. Sometimes if my son is doing his homework, I'll sit in the corner doing my own work. I'm not helping him. I'm just there working as well. So someone else being in the same environment and with you working is always helpful. Response inhibition, that's impulsivity. This one's really hard, you guys. And a lot of times, you can try strategies, but sometimes then it takes getting that extra help and even considering if that's something your family is open to using some medication along with modifications. Impulsivity is really hard for my son. So we're really working on that right now. And on top of the modifications, he does have medication to help with that. But you can do things like trying to get them to count to 10 before they respond. Creating mantras you repeat in your mind: stop, rethink, choose. Using that self-talk. Does this need to be said? Does it need to be said right now? Does this need to be said right now and by me? Encouraging overthinking before acting. That 24-hour rule before you send an angry email, make a major decision, or make a big purchase. Talking about having clear rules in advance. We do this with our kids when they're little. When we go in this store, we're not going to touch anything. You can only look. Or, myself going to Target. I only need milk. We are only buying milk today, Eileen. Only need milk. The other day, I literally was putting another graphic tee into my cart and I had to stop myself and say out loud and say, you do not need any more graphic tees, put it back, and got myself out of that section of Target. Sometimes using movement breaks or fiddles is helpful. Sometimes having a way, especially in class, to have a notepad or a Post-it note where you can jot down the thoughts and questions that you want to do rather than interrupting, or creating some kind of a cueing system. One thing could be if I'm in the middle of talking and my son wants to say something, sometimes, I'll put a finger up and I'll kind of give him a nod, I know you need to talk, but it's still my turn. Or vice versa. If I'm on the phone and he comes in and I know he wants to interrupt me, I'll put my finger up I see you, I know you want to say something, but you need to give it just a minute. Okay, and lastly, persistence. Sticking with it, right? A lot of that comes from breaking things down into smaller, more achievable steps. Thinking A to B, not A to Z. And building that momentum and building on those successes. You need to schedule your goals, set deadlines for yourself. Use rewards and incentives. I'm all about bribing, you guys. We all do it. If I worked out 5 days at the gym, I get to go get a manicure, right? Use them. Making sure you're praising effort, not just outcome. So I really like how hard you worked for that 25 minutes on your math, right? And also a lot of times, I'll start working together. My son with math was a struggle. So it started off, I was his scribe. I would write down, he would talk me through the problems. Then we alternated where he would write one and I would write one, and then he would do it on his own, but I would be nearby if he needed assistance. And then there's also some support that shows if you write down your goals, you are more likely to achieve it, 42% more likely to achieve it. So one last strategy that I have for you all is using some kind of a weekly check-in to make sure you're on top of things, you're maintaining things, you're building on successes. I like to use Seth Perler's, his is a systems check. Some people will do family huddles, family meetings, calendar checks, things like that. This, once you get good at it, it can take about 15 minutes max. My daughter is on board with it, does it easily. My son fights it a little bit, so we worked together to problem solve. And what we do is we kind of break it up, a couple of things on different days, but we are getting all the things done. The first is going through that backpack, overhauling it, going through all those papers, getting rid of what you don't need, putting those in those limbo systems, cleaning it out. Every week, get it done. The next is looking at your planner, updating your planner, looking at the family calendar, transitioning things over, going through emails. I'll go through my emails as they go through theirs, seeing what we need to add to the calendar, making sure we're cleaning it out. We look at grades, minimum once a week. Then we act on it. So what if it shows you're missing an assignment? What can you do? Well, you can email that teacher right now. Let's do it. Or there's that handout. You haven't handed it in. It's still sitting in your folder. What are we going to do? All right, put a big highlight or highlight, post it on it. Make sure you get that handed in. Clean out that computer. Clean up the tabs, the pins, the calendars, the tasks, the emails. Seth Perler talks a lot about the sacred study space. That's just creating a workspace that is inviting and ready to work. So you're not running around looking for the things that you need, wasting valuable time and resources. Get your workspace clean. Looking at your study routine and your workflow. How is it this week? Looking at your stress and overwhelming sources. How can we minimize that? How can we reframe that? What coping can we do around that? And then I like this one too. It talks about family and friends. How are your relationships going and what can we do? And then oftentimes based on how much time. Oftentimes what we'll do then is I will challenge my kids to say, what's one little thing that you can do to change this, whatever, this week? What's one little thing that you can do to be more organized? What's one little thing you can do to reach out to your friends? So they're also kind of building some informal goals into that as well. So if you feel you're at the stage where you need an executive function coach because your kids don't want to listen to you saying it, I hear that all the time. I do want to let you know that this is not a licensed profession, that anybody can do it. Teachers, special ed teachers, occupational therapists, speech therapists, coaches, life coaches, you name it. Know that because there's a variety of professionals providing these services, they all come into it with a different slant, lean, and approach. And because most services are not covered by insurance, I really encourage you to vet your candidates, your coaches really well. Find out what they do. Are they in person or online? How much as you as a parent would you be involved? How do they measure progress? Do they use a set protocol or practicum? And what do they do if it's not working for your child? Really take the time to ask those questions before you make this investment. Okay, I'm thinking you guys all probably need a brain dump about right now. I talked nonstop, gave you a lot of good information, but I would love to turn the floor over to you all and answer any questions that you may have for me.
Eileen, thank you so much. I have a laundry list of things that I'm going to start implementing tomorrow. One of the first questions we got, and I just want to answer it. I did answer to the one person, but to make sure everyone was able to view that, is that if, there's so many good advice and resources that you gave tonight, this will be recorded and the recording of this webinar will be on our YouTube channel probably later this week. And you'll also be getting a link in an email for that. So just in case you need to refer back to it, not to worry. We had a couple questions that came in while you were speaking. One was, at what age do you recommend helping your child put together a planned calendar?
I think you can start at a young age by just getting your kids involved with your family calendar, right? So it might be that you're sitting down and saying, hey, what's going on this week with us? Oh, and Wednesday you have soccer practice. That's right. We're going to have dinner later this week. So you're really kind of getting that idea put into their head. I think I started with my kids probably like middle school-ish type age where they were doing their own planners and having their own responsibilities. But certainly younger than that, we were always kind of talking about what we had on our calendar as a family.
Okay, great. And then someone asked, what were the ages of your children, if you don't mind sharing? And are these everything you shared tonight references for all age groups?
Sure. My kids are 16 and 14. And the references, I'm not sure if you're talking about the norms or if you're talking about the people that I referred you to. I'm not sure we can get that.
Yeah, I will see if Monica can onto that. Overall, that everything.
Yeah, the references of the people that I referred you to in the different websites, they certainly, a lot of this is skewed towards, middle age and high schoolers, right? But you can certainly find executive function stuff that applies to younger kids as well.
Great. Julie asked, do you have any tips for convincing your high school teen to keep a planner? Mine does not think he needs one for school. He is normally very organized and tends to business, but want him to build skills for the future.
Yeah. So I think that to some degree, you really need to talk about how this brain dump is really going to be helpful for him to accomplish the goals that he wants to do. And that to talk about planners can look a lot of different ways. He may have it set in his mind that that planner has to be that old school written one, and this is what it needs to do. The planner could go along with the phone on his calendar. And I think some of it is also getting off to a good start with a planner, like in the beginning of the year. Let's just get down your soccer practices. Let's just get down when your tests are. Let's get down when the SAT is going to be. So you can get kind of those longer range things in there, maybe avoiding all the minutia of all the everyday things, but looking at the longer term planning and then start to build around that then too.
Great. How long, I think the thing that struck me the most about your presentation was just the language that you use. I thought it was great. I just feel like it's a new way of talking to your kid when you say things like, "How will you be reminded?" or saying thank you versus I'm sorry. How long did it take you to kind of implement that into your everyday language with how you were speaking to your
Uh,
kids?
Yeah, the how will you be reminded, I really picked up on quickly because it works for my kids.
Yeah.
So once I saw that success, and it was really easy to kind of incorporate that. So very common with my son, he will be playing games. How long are you going to play? I'm going to play for 20 minutes. Okay, how are you going to be reminded when it's time to stop? And he'll say, I'll set a timer. And then today he said to me, and when that timer goes off, if I don't listen, I'll set another one. So I think that that one was really easy for me to have habit, become habit. I'm getting better at the open-ended what got in the way. All honesty, I want to swoop in and save the day all the time. And just today, like we were getting into it a little bit about something that needed to be done, and I was able to stop and say, okay, I hear that you're frustrated that I keep reminding you about this. Tonight, after dinner, let's take 15 minutes and talk about what's getting in the way and what we can do to improve that. And just gave him a little bit of time. And then he was able to come back to me like 15 minutes later, out of that state, thought about it more clearly and able to move on. And I think once your kids start to see that you're willing to collaborate with them, you're not necessarily dictating with them, you get a lot more buy-in and you have a lot more success. So for me, it's just really remembering that I don't have to be the one swooping in. I have to just be the one that's helping facilitate them to take the lead.
Yeah, that's very true. How many, as someone asked, how many times do you let them reset the timer?
um Honestly, not too many. um, because then that will just go on forever, right? That's the person who hits the snooze, 5 times and then is late for
Yeah.
school. I would say maybe once. And then I might step my head in and say, hey, I hear your timer, going off again. We need to get out the door because we're going to the movie in 10 minutes or whatever the case may be. So I might step in with a verbal reminder at that time.
Okay. So I know most of this presentation was geared obviously towards parents, but obviously as parents, these children are students, and so a lot of this executive function deficits overlap into the school setting. You talked about kind of that transition of us advocating as parents for our children in the IEP meetings and the 504, and kind of knowing all their goals and accommodations and everything as far as that that legal document goes. How old do you recommend a student should be to get involved in their own? I mean, obviously I know districts kind of will probably offer that, but in your experience, what has worked best?
At middle school, at minimum, I would say. I talk to my kids even earlier than that, just about like those, like, it is what it is kind of things. Like, you're not really great at organization. So, or you don't do well when it's allowed for testing. So you're going to go outside the room to be able to do that. Right. So just kind of talked very matter of fact about these are the things that help you, but really stepped it up when they were in that junior high age. And got to the point where, like, my daughter would say, my teacher wasn't going to let me do this, but I reminded her that I was allowed to do this under my IEP and that I needed to go have my quiet space, right? So I think that is a really critical age. And I also found that was the age when all of a sudden you go from junior high to high school and it's all on the kids, right? They don't really want to hear from parents anymore. So I think that it was a critical age for them to know that these are the things that are going to help them. And these are the things that are going to help them in high school. And this is what we need to do to make sure that they're getting them.
Yeah. Yeah. And we talk a lot about that at the foundation when we do other webinars on, the adult transition, and just a lot
Right.
of times not building that at a younger age, sets our kids up for failure, just because, if they do go to college or find a job, having to advocate then to their employer, things that are challenging them or not, sometimes they're relying still on their parents to do that. So it's good to kind of start at an earlier age. So I appreciate the kind of your guidance on that.
Yeah.
Would, to kind of piggyback off that, would you suggest that, I guess at what age, like from early on, that parents kind of advocate to have some executive function skills added into their child's IEPs?
Yeah. My district was really great because they had, starting in junior high, they had an executive function class that he took. It was kind of like an extra study hall where they actually taught these skills, and they continue to do it in high school. But even at a younger age, Whether or not it was written as a goal, it was something that we were also always targeting, right? And it could have been at the level of, Nate needs a reminder to hand in his reading log, right? So you're targeting or setting up systems in that level as well. Or even a bigger one, he should not be penalized if he is not handing in his reading log on time, right? Because this is executive function. This is not behavior. So a lot of the advocating I did at that age, I wasn't necessarily getting goals written, but I was making sure that processes were established to make sure that those skills were being worked on and that the teacher was aware of them and responding to them in an appropriate manner.
Okay. And we had another question that came in. Is executive function commonly known in the helping professions you mentioned as potential coaches, or have you had to inform or educate people to be of help to you?
I can speak as a speech therapist, it would be very well known. I think the educators are well known. It's well known as well, the occupational therapists. I think if I talk to someone who's not in the helping profession, they really don't understand what that is or what it needs to be done. But there is a lot of confusion. We'll get some people who come in and they're looking more for a life coach than they are looking for an executive function coach. Or some people are looking, like we have people who are like, closet organizers, or they're looking just for the physical help of doing that. There's a lot of different people who are doing a lot of similar kinds of things. So I think you for sure, if you just Googled in your area executive function coaches, you might find that, or ADHD coaches, you might find that. But if your child is receiving like OT or speech therapy and you talked that this is an area you wanted to focus on, they certainly should be able to address that.
Okay. Does anyone have any other questions? This has been so informative. And we've had a lot of great questions that have come in. Give it like one more minute. Oh, one more. Oh, some thank yous. Kara said, Crew's only 4 years old, but I can see how these tools will be helpful for his older neurotypical brothers. And I agree. I feel like this is going to be very helpful to all of my children, not just
yes, all
the
teams.
22Q.
Yes, everybody. And like
And
I
for
said,
myself, just to be organized, especially when you're talking about that Target. I mean, I think I'm going to have to do some self-talk at Target when I go tomorrow.
I do it all the time. I will say like 2-minute rule, like, oh God, okay, I just got to go take care of this now or put this away. Like I do it too. It helps for us all.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for such an informative presentation with all of these very tangible and helpful resources. I think they're things that we can put into place tomorrow. You shared so many easy ways to help change our kids' mindsets, our mindsets, and how to improve executive function skills over time, and also just how to be flexible, having a plan B and kind of leaning to some changes if you need to. So again, just a reminder that this recording will be available on our YouTube channel later this week. And also we have another webinar coming up that is targeting transition to adulthood. It's going to be an honest conversation. We're really excited about it. It will be on September 17th. So you can check out our website or social media for more details about that. But we'll be having our career coach, Jason Osborne, share about his insight as far as trends that he's seen working with our teen population and young adults that have 22Q. And then as well, we're going to have a parent and adult panel. So we'll have 3 different individuals with 22Q, as well as most of their parents attending. So it should be a really interesting conversation just to kind of give you some insight into 3 examples per se of what life looks like after high school. So tune in more for that in the future. But again, Eileen, thank you so much for taking your time and sharing your expert advice with all of us. And we hope you guys have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.